Hi, my name is Audrey. I'm 26 years old and live in Fort Worth, Texas. I was diagnosed with papillary thyroid carcinoma with tall cell variant features in October of 2023. Outside of cancer diagnosis, I am a speech language pathologist and I love spending time with my friends and family, a huge travel fan. I'm involved with my church and just love adventures. So, my journey to cancer diagnosis was quite an interesting one. My cancer diagnosis was actually an incidental finding to about an 8 month period of multiple health issues. So, I'll kind of start back from the beginning. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, actually from Fort Worth after I finished my master's program in 2022. And pretty shortly into that first fall, I got sick just with pneumonia, like bronchitis, really all respiratory. That sickness lasted about the whole month. Had fever with it, and was kind of getting better from that a little bit around December. But I've never felt like I quite got over it fully. And so, kind of into the new year, I started to experience more symptoms, things that felt like they didn't really line up with or correlated with other things. I experienced some night sweats in January, and just severe fatigue. And then when we got into about March, my symptoms really started to pick up there. So in March, I developed this sharp pain in the lower left lung area. It was super short of breath. And it was kind of then that I was like, I know something is really wrong. Um, so I hadn't even gotten established with a primary care doctor yet since I'd only been in Tennessee for a few months. And finding a doctor, because they have wait lists like no other, took a while. Found a first doctor, went to him and told him my symptoms and was dismissed. He did a little bit of blood work and he said, I'm not really sure what else this could be. And I was like, I know that something is wrong and I'm having all of these different symptoms. Can we do any more investigation? And after a couple appointments with him, I was like, you know what? I'm going to find somebody else. So went and found a different primary care provider, and she was wonderful. So I came to her. This was at the end of April. Told her my symptoms, and she was like, "Yeah, that's pretty concerning." About that time as well, starting in May, I started to have low grade fevers every single day. So that was very alarming. And I did my Google research, which proceed with caution, and that really freaked me out. So I told her about that. She was very concerned, and she went ahead and ordered a chest CT because of the shortness of breath, the pain in my side, and the fevers. So I had that chest CT May 25th of 2023, and I was at an outpatient imaging center and was kind of waiting a while after the scan. And then the doctor came in, and I knew that probably was not a good sign. And he said that they saw a pulmonary embolism and to go to the ER immediately. So I, called my parents who are hours and hours and hours away back in Texas. My mom hops on a plane and I head to the Vanderbilt ER in Nashville. So I packed a bag because I didn't know how long I was going to be there. Got to the ER, and really the result of that ER situation was they put me on a pretty high dosage of blood thinners for that blood clot, and then had me follow up with a hematologist afterwards. So followed up with a hematologist, and the hematologist and really several doctors after the fact reviewed the scan, and no one could say with 100% certainty whether I did or didn't have a blood clot. So I was like, wait a second. I've sent to the ER for a blood clot. I'm on these blood thinners, which are making me feel pretty crummy. And now we're not sure if I did or didn't have a blood clot. I had a lab. It's called your D dimer. It was positive, but that's not super specific or indicative of whether or not you had a blood clot. And I saw pulmonology, hematology, ended up at the Mayo Clinic, which I'll get to. And everyone kind of said the same thing. We can't rule it out completely. Some doctors think I had one, some didn't, to be determined still. So I ended up, after that first ER visit, back in the ER about a week later. I was feeling pretty bad on those blood thinners. And about 5 days later, had this really scary episode of some pretty severe chest pain. The color had kind of drained out of my face. I was really fortunate that my mom was still with me in Nashville, so she took me back to the ER. And I had a heart enzyme level that was elevated a little bit, your troponin level. And so they kind of retested that a few times, waited for it to go back down, and it did. And then kind of went on my way, and that started a summer of specialist after specialist. So I first saw pulmonology for the blood clot, and they kind of said, we're not sure. Saw hematology. They were concerned, especially with the fevers and the night sweats, about lymphoma as well. So they did some testing for that. And then I started to develop some more chest pain that was pretty frequent throughout that summer in 2023. And I saw a cardiologist for that. And then they diagnosed me with pericarditis. So, inflammation of the lining around your heart and some tricuspid valve insufficiency. So, my tricuspid valve flap was not closing all the way, and some blood was backflowing. So, I'm like, well, now I have a heart diagnosis. Was put on a medication for that, and thankfully that medication did clear up the pericarditis, and I have not had any recurrence of that um, since that last fall, which is great. But that was kind of another weird, diagnosis thrown in the mix. And I will say too, from blood clot to pericarditis diagnosis was about 2-3 months in between. And when I received that blood clot diagnosis, I was like, maybe this is it. Like, this is what my symptoms have been leading up to. Like, this is the diagnosis. But I just felt such an unsteady, uneasy feeling, and knew that that wasn't it, that there was more. And then I got the pericarditis diagnosis, and I was like, oh, well, maybe this is it. But I still had that feeling, your gut feeling, which is so important to listen to. Your gut feeling, or your God feeling, as I like to call it too. Um, and I knew something still wasn't right. But at that point, you start to question yourself, right? You're like, wait, am I being crazy? Like this, because it seems like so much. It just seems like that wouldn't happen to me. I'm young and I haven't had any health issues before this. Um, During that summer as well, I started to develop these lymph nodes on my neck. So I had one kind of on this side that was my primary concern, and a few on the sides of my neck as well. So swollen neck, and was very concerned about those. Brought that to my primary care provider in August of 2023. So this is post blood clot, post pericarditis, and I have an appointment with her. And at this point, I'm like, I want a PET scan. So I really pushed and said, I want a full body PET scan. It was difficult to get that ordered. And I wasn't with a specialist. My primary care was great, but it was just a family medicine primary care office. Thankfully, I was in a good healthcare system. But it did take some significant pushing and working with the insurance company to get that PET scan. But it was approved about a month later, which was a hard month to wait for. And I don't know what I was quite expecting with the PET scan. With all of the diagnoses and the symptoms, I definitely had cancer, on the forefront of my mind, just because I just had that inkling. And I had the PET scan done in September, and a big tumor lit up on my thyroid. So that was a little bit of a shock. On the thyroid side of things, prior to all of these health issues, I've been healthy my whole life. I had never even had a surgery. I'd never had an IV before. So really pretty healthy. Now I did have Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. I was diagnosed with that back when I was in high school. And so I knew that I had nodules on my thyroid, but those were being monitored by my endocrinologist. I had ultrasounds of those every year, and there was nothing ever concerning with that. My mom had thyroid cancer actually as well about 10 years ago. So, there's the genetic component of that. And on my mom's side of the family, cancer is pretty prominent. So my mom had thyroid cancer. Her dad had adenocarcinoma that started, I think, in the stomach or the bile duct. While it was a shock to hear thyroid cancer, just because that's not what I was thinking of, I was worried about cancer, but I was like, oh my goodness. But at this point, I didn't know it was cancer either. I just knew that a tumor had lit up on the PET scan. So I had a biopsy done of that in October, and it did come back as cancerous papillary thyroid carcinoma with some tall cell features on it. At this point, all of my doctors were pretty puzzled as to my long list of symptoms and diagnoses, which ones related to the thyroid cancer versus ones that were unrelated. Was there something else going on with my body? And so at that point, they recommended that I go to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Um, it was really quite a blessing how I ended up getting to the Mayo Clinic. It was a pretty easy and fast process, which was really great. So I was able to go there and spend about a week there in October. So I went to the Mayo Clinic and had about every test done under the sun. I think I saw 7 different specialists. Um, and testing, I think I remember in one sitting, I had 30 vials of blood taken. My poor arms took quite a beating, but I was very, very fortunate to be able to see doctors at such a prestigious institution and really have some of the best on my healthcare team. What came out of that was that blood clot wise, they still couldn't confirm nor deny, of course. Pericarditis wise, they did see that, but confirmed that had cleared up, which was great. And then I had a head and neck CT done there as well, and that showed what looked like either lymph node involvement with the thyroid cancer or another tumor. And so I was able to take that information back to my surgeon in Nashville, a wonderful surgeon. Um, because initially the tumor, it was on the larger side, but it was on the right side. And so we had initially discussed about possibly just taking that right side, but combined with the family history, and then they're not sure, about it's looking like lymph nodes might be involved. She was like, we've got to take the whole thing out. So I had that surgery the week of Thanksgiving 2023, so last Thanksgiving. And it turned out to be a little bit more of an involved surgery. It took a little bit longer. My surgeon said that my thyroid was so diseased that it was almost adhered to my trachea. So that Hashimoto's that I had, and of course that hasn't been easy since I was in high school, getting medication regulated for that and having symptoms going up and down. But that it was very diseased. In addition to that, she saw some lymph nodes that looked suspicious. She ended up doing a right central neck dissection. So she took almost my whole cervical fat pad of lymph nodes out in the surgery as well. And then I had a couple of my parathyroid glands that were supplying the blood to my thyroid, which is not typical. So she had to move one of them. So she auto transplanted that parathyroid gland into my left neck muscle. Um, Medicine is crazy. It was really, I was very fortunate to have such an amazing surgeon, and she did a wonderful job. My scar, looks really good. So then we're post surgery in recovery. The biggest thing I had to navigate post surgery was regulating my calcium levels. After surgery, it took a full month to get my pathology report back. And that month was one of the hardest, just waiting to hear to see if there was any spreading. So get that report back, and it said, which is a miracle because she had said the lymph nodes they're darker or black if they usually look like there's been metastasis, um, that there was no spreading. And so, an absolute miracle. Was so excited about that. I did decide to send my pathology results to Mayo. I thought, you know what, I have this amazing resource. Why not get a second opinion? Second opinions had kind of been the name of my game throughout this whole process with so many differing opinions and diagnoses. So I had Mayo review the pathology report, and they came back and their interpretation was different. So their interpretation said that there was lymphovascular invasion of the cancer. So then I took those results back to my surgeon and the doctors that I had in Nashville, and they took my case up to the Vanderbilt Tumor Board to review. Mayo and Vanderbilt consulted with each other, which it's still, when I talk about it, is just crazy that, like I said, so fortunate to have two of the best, when it comes to healthcare working together on it. So the result of that was that they determined that there was lymph invasion, but not vascular invasion, which it's good. It's a good thing there was not vascular invasion. So after seeing a few doctors, I kind of, heard different opinions on both sides of whether or not to do the radiation, which is radioactive iodine, is typically a common treatment for papillary thyroid cancer. As of right now, my doctors and I have kind of decided to take a conservative approach and to hold off on the RAI right now. My tumor markers have been continuing to decrease, so I am getting regular check-ins every 3 months. I'm on an every 3 month schedule right now. But yeah, so it's just kind of a waiting after the first year, but everything's really looking in good shape. So it's been really nice coming out of the new year. Hearing the words remission in February was a huge celebration, and feeling like I could breathe. I still was having some lingering symptoms. Like I said, it's hard to determine what was thyroid cancer related and what was related to something else, if any. My Mayo doctors, the best that they could guess is that aside from the thyroid cancer, that I had had some virus that just wreaked havoc on my body. When I look at the list of symptoms I experienced throughout the fall, I had, these crazy rashes. I broke out in a rash on my legs or on my chest. The fevers persisted. I probably had those for about a 6 month span, almost every single day. Um, just all of these symptoms. And so I did, as happy as I was to hear about the remission from the thyroid cancer, I I still was having some symptoms, and so I was like, I don't know if something else is still wrong, but it's just kind of a tricky mind game. Now, thankfully, even some of those have cleared up now, so I'm really feeling pretty good right now, which is great. So I'm very very thankful for that. Something really interesting was one of my doctors stated that this that this cancer was not genetic, which I'm not so sure if what my thoughts are on that, because I've kind of heard otherwise, and especially because that runs in the family. Um, but it is really interesting too that thyroid cancer is on the rise, and at kind of alarming rates, and cancer in young people in general, which is really scary. Some things that have helped me. So, first and foremost, support system has been critical for me. Of course, I moved to Nashville and I didn't know anybody when I moved there, but quickly found, a work family. I had amazing coworkers in Nashville. Really found a good friend group as well. And if I look at it one way, I'm like, yeah, why did I have to move to Nashville? And then, I'm excited to start this new life adventure, and then cancer. But on the other hand, I look and I don't think, had I moved anywhere else, I could have, gotten through that as I did without the people that I met in Nashville. Like I said, work was incredibly flexible, so kind. I actually had a coworker that was going through a different cancer at the time, and really found friendship with her, and just having someone to talk to that, while we had very different cancers, we also shared a lot of the same struggles. Um, so really that community was a great blessing. Cancer does not discriminate. Cancer can affect anybody, and I think that you never think that it's going to happen to you, probably at any age, but especially when you're young. And doctors, especially, not having any prior medical history, um, I feel like to some of my doctors that I saw that it felt like a far reach with these symptoms, and me coming in with my folder that had all my papers and my typed up summary, of everything that I was experiencing. I think that it was hard too because I had so many different symptoms, so it wasn't like a very concrete, short list. And so that even was kind of difficult when I went to the Mayo Clinic, because it was like, which specialist do you start with? Because I've got like a little bit of cardiology, a little bit of hematology, um, all of the different symptoms. But I think it's also, for thyroid cancer, and this is the case for some other types of cancers too. I was told by, different people and a healthcare professional, oh, you got the good cancer. And that is not something that you want to hear. Every cancer, no cancer is good cancer. So that, I think that's something to always be cognizant of too, is that everyone, anyone experiencing cancer, whether it be a melanoma, thyroid cancer, all the way to pancreatic cancer, um, can have life altering, can change your life forever. Um, and even on the side, like me being young, and most of my friends haven't gone through, my age haven't gone through anything like this either. And we had a lot of honest conversations as well. Like one of my best friends said, I don't know quite how to respond to this. She goes, I'm really upset by it, but I don't know how to be there for you. Like, what do you need? And I think just the honesty in that conversation was great, because I thought, if I was in someone else's shoes, I don't know, if I'd had the words to say either. Something that was the most helpful for me was just someone being with me, just sitting and being there if I needed to vent or just didn't want to be alone. So I think having that honest and open dialogue as well, and leaning on your support systems, which is not always easy to do. I'm a very independent person. I was like, yeah, like I'm moving to a different state, excited to start this adventure. I've always been a very independent person. And so moving to Nashville and then being faced with this, and, recognizing that I need to lean on my supports. I had a great community there, and they offered so much of their time and their resources. And I got better with it a little bit as time went on. But initially, you don't want to be a burden to people. And I had some amazing, just absolutely amazing close friends and people who offered to take me to different appointments, and things like that, which truly meant the world. But I think just advocating for yourself, because if you think about it, what's the worst that's going to happen? If you know that something is wrong, and your gut is telling you that, why not push to see? Worst comes to worst, you push and everything checks out normal, but at least you have that peace of mind. And doctors are humans too. So I think, it can be really difficult when you're not getting the answers that you want, but giving doctors grace, because they are humans and they don't have all of the answers either. And just taking it day by day. I think my greatest takeaway, would be that this is temporary. It's going to pass. In the sense of you leaning on your supports. Like you're not gonna need all that all the time. Hope. So for me, my faith is really central to who I am, and that has given me the most hope. I had a friend ask me when I was kind of in the thick of everything if I was angry at God for, what was happening. And was I angry at the situation? Sure, I was absolutely angry at the situation, but I was never angry at God. I felt Him so close the whole time. In fact, closer, than I ever had. And I think that's really a testament to that, God meets you where you're at, and is with you. And I think throughout this journey as well, it's had its ups and downs, but um, just having that hope to hold on to, leaning on your supports, advocate for yourself, listen to that inner gut feeling, and don't think, oh, well, that could never happen, or that's kind of a reach. Do your research. Don't overdo it. You're right. Don't let it consume your every thought, but just live in that hope that you're going to get through it. This too shall pass, and there's a lot of joy within the pain as well. I think that's something too throughout this past year and a half. My time in Nashville, it was one of the absolute hardest times of my life ever, but it also was one of the most beautiful times of my life. I wouldn't have made, certain connections, relationships. There were so many miracles thrown in the mix that, how could you not have hope, seeing those things?